Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is R.S. Raghu, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring to you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment, and more. The headlines. President of India Draupadi Murmu says, in the atmosphere of discord and wars, global community is looking towards India for a solution. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar criticizes China for not following border agreements with India. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh dedicates to the nation 28 border infrastructure projects worth 724 crore rupees. Russia says more than 60 of its soldiers killed in a Ukrainian strike on Moscow-controlled territory in Donetsk. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks with King Charles III of United Kingdom, discusses India's G20 presidency and climate action. Venezuela ready to normalize ties with the US, says President Nicolas Maduro. And in cricket, India set a target of 163 runs for Sri Lanka in first T20 match in Mumbai. President of India Draupadi Murmu has said that in the atmosphere of discord and wars, the global community is looking towards India for a solution. She said India is playing the role of a harbinger of peace in the world. She was speaking after launching a national campaign on Rise, that is, Rising India through Spiritual Empowerment in Rajasthan on Tuesday. The President emphasized that India's aim is to become a knowledge superpower which should be used for sustainable development, social harmony and lasting peace in the world.
अमृत काल में सन 2047 के स्वर्णिम भारत की ओर आगे बढ़ते हुए हमारे देश को विश्व शांति के लिए विज्ञान और अध्यात्म दोनों का उपयोग करना होगा। हमारा लक्ष्य है कि भारत एक नॉलेज सुपर पावर बने। इस नॉलेज का उपयोग सस्टेनेबल डेवलप के लिए हो, सामाजिक सौहार्द के लिए हो, महिलाओं तथा वंचित वर्गों के उत्थान के लिए हो, युवाओं की ऊर्जा के समुचित उपयोग के लिए हो तथा विश्व में स्थायी शांति की स्थापना के लिए हो।
Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has criticized China for not observing agreements with India on border issues. During an interview to Austria's national broadcaster ORF on Monday, Dr. Jaishankar pointed out the reason for tense situation between the two neighbors.
The concern is that we had agreements with China not to mass forces in our border areas, and they have not observed those agreements, which is why we have the currently tense situation that we do. We had an agreement not to unilaterally change the line of control, which they have tried to unilaterally do that.
On China trying to change the status quo, the minister said Beijing may blame India for not following the agreements. However, the satellite pictures clearly show who is at the fault. The two countries have held 17 rounds of talks so far to resolve the standoff. Mr. Jaishankar said India will probably overtake China as the world's most populous country within this year. Highlighting the need for reforms in the United Nations, the Indian minister regretted that the world's most populous country is not among the permanent members of the Security Council. In a veiled attack on Pakistan during the interview, the External Affairs Minister termed it an epicenter of terrorism. He said the world has to be concerned that terrorism is going on and should not look away.
I think epicenter is a very diplomatic word, because this is a country which has attacked the Parliament of India some years ago, which attacked the city of Mumbai, which went after hotels and foreign tourists, which every day sends terrorists across the border. If you control your sovereign space, which I believe they do, if the terrorist camps operate in broad daylight in cities with recruitment and financing, can you really tell me that the Pakistani state doesn't know what's going on?
The minister also hit out at the European countries for not condemning Pakistan. Dr. S. Jaishankar reached Austria from Cyprus on the second leg of his two-nation tour. This is the first EAM-level visit from India to Austria in the last 27 years. Meanwhile, Indian External Affairs Minister on Tuesday met the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, in Vienna. In a tweet, Dr. Jaishankar said during the meeting he discussed several issues including India International Atomic Energy Agency cooperation, India's G20 presidency, the global energy scenario, Ukraine and Indo-Pacific. Indian External Affairs Minister has said that Europe has imported 6 times the fossil fuel energy from Russia than India has done since February last year. He was quoted saying this in a New York Times report titled "Russia's War Could Make It India's World." The report quoted the Dr. Jaishankar saying that a world order which is still very deeply Western is being hurried out of existence by the impact of the Ukraine conflict to be replaced by a world of multi-alignment where countries will choose their own particular policies and preferences and interests. In the New York Times article, the minister said that he would still like to see a more rules-based world. Dr. Jaishankar said India has had a much more peaceful, productive relationship with the world than Europe. He said Europe has been expansionist, which is why the world witnessed the period of imperialism and colonialism. However, he asserted despite being subjected to colonialism for 2 centuries, India is a very open society and there is no anger against the world. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh on Tuesday inaugurated 28 infrastructure projects during an event in Arunachal Pradesh. These projects have been completed by the Border Roads Organisation BRO, built at a cost of 724 crore rupees. The projects will hugely augment India's border infrastructure, mostly along the Chinese border, from Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh. Later in the day, the Indian Defence Minister virtually inaugurated the Bailey Suspension Bridge over the Chenab River in Ramban district of Jammu and Kashmir. The 240 feet high bridge has been completed by BRO a month before the deadline. Russia has said more than 60 of its soldiers were killed in an Ukrainian strike on Russian-controlled territory in a New Year assault. The strike took place in the city of Makivka in the Donetsk region in the eastern Ukraine on New Year's Eve. It is the highest number of deaths acknowledged by Moscow in a single incident since the conflict began last year. In a rare announcement, the Russian Defense Ministry said 63 Russian servicemen were killed as a result of strike by 4 missiles in Makivka. The ministry said US-supplied HIMARS rocket system had been used and the target was a temporary deployment point. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces said in a statement that its forces were behind the strikes on Makivka. Earlier in the day, the Strategic Communications Department of Ukraine's armed forces said nearly 400 Russian troops were killed in Makivka. The General Staff, which usually communicates on such incidents, did not confirm the figure and said the human losses were still being established. International Monetary Fund IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said the 3 big economies, the United States, Europe and China, are all slowing down simultaneously. For much of the global economy, 2023 is going to be a tough year as the main engines of global growth. In October, the IMF cut its outlook for global economic growth in 2023, reflecting the continuing drag from the war in Ukraine, as well as inflation pressures and the high interest rates engineered by central banks like the US Federal Reserve, aimed at bringing those price pressures to heel. Since then, China has scrapped its zero-COVID policy and embarked on a chaotic reopening of its economy, though consumers there remain wary as coronavirus cases surge. India's manufacturing sector activity ended on a very positive note in 2022, with December reporting output level best seen since November 2021. The Purchasing Managers Index PMI average for the third quarter of the current fiscal year was the highest recorded in a year, posting 57.8 in December, up from 55.7 in November. The seasonally adjusted S&P Global India Manufacturing PMI signaled the strongest improvement in operating conditions since October 2020. The latest PMI data corroborates signs of robust economic activity signaled by other indicators like GST collections, which stood at 1.5 trillion rupees in December, the third highest level this fiscal, and robust auto fuel sales. The output of 8 core sector industries grew 5.4% on year in November, recovering from their worst performance in 20 months in the previous month. The Government of India on Tuesday signed several loan agreements with the Asian Development Bank to boost the infrastructure sector in the country. The Finance Ministry said a loan agreement worth $350 million was inked to improve connectivity in the state of Maharashtra. A loan agreement worth $300 million will be utilized to upgrade over 300 kilometers of state highways and major district roads in Assam. The other agreements aim to improving power sector in Tripura and building new power lines along with improving connectivity of the metro rail system in Chennai. And now, in today's Hotspot section, we bring you a news commentary on GST revenue brings cheer to India in New Year.
The gross GST revenue collected during December 2022 is 1,49,507 crore rupees, of which CGST is 26,711 crore, SGST is 33,357 crore, IGST is 78,434 crore, including 40,263 crore rupees collected on import of goods, and cess is 11,005 crore, including 850 crore rupees collected on import of goods. The revenues for the month of December 2022 are 15% higher than the GST revenues in the same month last year. During the month, revenues from import of goods were 8% higher and the revenues from domestic transaction, including import of services, are 18% higher than the revenues from these sources during the same month last year. During the month of November 2022, 7.9 crore e-way bills were generated, which was significantly higher than 7.6 crore e-way bills generated in October 2022. The Goods and Services Tax, GST, was introduced in India on the 1st of July 2017. The rolling out of GST has been one of the significant reforms in the realm of taxation in India, especially in the indirect tax regime. Over the last 5 years, the GST reforms have contributed to strengthening tax compliance and tax administration in India. The government's One Nation, One Market, One Tax has been the rationale behind redesigning India's indirect tax system. The GST regime has brought 1.3 million taxpayers into a unified indirect tax regime. The GST regime has simplified tax filing procedure for business and improved the ease of doing business in India. The entrepreneurs and traders have benefited from the transparency the regime has brought in for paying taxes. One of the significant variables in the construction of ease of doing index by the World Bank is the ease of paying taxes. The GST reforms have helped to improve the ease of doing index ranking of India significantly. GST is a significant tax reform since independence, which subsumed 17 existing levies like VAT, excise duty, service tax and 13 cesses. The GST regime has simplified tax structure ranging from a low rate of 5% for essential commodities to 28% levied on luxury goods. The other tax slabs are of 12% and 18%. A special 3% rate is levied for gold. In addition, a cess is levied on the highest tax slab of 28% on luxury goods like cars and sin goods such as aerated drinks, coal, pan masala and cigarettes. This cess collection goes to a separate corpus compensation fund, which is used for GST compensation to the state governments to make up for the revenue loss suffered by the states after the GST rollout. The Government of India has extended the Goods and Services Tax compensation cess until March the 31st, 2026. The cess was to end on June 30th, 2022, 5 years after the GST rollout on July 1st, 2017. In September 2021, the GST Council had also decided on an extension to raise funds to repay loans taken by states to make up for the shortfall in compensation cess collections due to the COVID-19 pandemic in the last 2 years. When GST was rolled out, states were promised compensation from the cess fund for 5 years if their GST collection falls short of the revenue neutral rate at 14% compounded revenue growth. Since July 1st, 2017, the tax base has increased significantly, with 1.36 crore active GST registrations in India as per data on March 31st, 2022. Data also reveals that GST revenue collections have crossed the mark of 1.45 lakh crore rupees every month since June 2022. The rationalization of tax rates under GST regime is a crucial ongoing process. The GST billed as One Nation, One Tax has been India's most ambitious indirect tax reforms since independence. The political economy of GST over the last 5 years has been judicious. There is immense scope for further reforms to achieve the potential of GST revenue buoyancy.
The Sensex and the Nifty on Tuesday witnessed modest gains. We have a report.
The Sensex rose 126 points to settle at 61,294. The Nifty also added 35 points to finish at 18,233. Among global stock markets, Asian shares ended mixed. China's Shanghai Composite Index rose 0.9% and Hong Kong's Hang Seng gained 0.3%. On the other hand, Singapore's Straits Times Index closed marginally down by 0.2% and South Korea's Kospi fell 0.3%. Japan's Nikkei 225 was closed due to a holiday. European shares were up in intraday trade. Oil prices fell around 1.5% as investors expected lower demand amid weak manufacturing activity, survey from China. A warning from the head of the International Monetary Fund that the global economy will face a tough year ahead also dampened investor sentiment. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading at $84.65 per barrel. Back home at the multi-commodity exchange, gold futures for February were trading at 55,555 rupees per 10 grams. Silver futures for March were trading at 70,600 rupees per kilogram when reports last came in. Gaurang Dhamanlal for World News, All India Radio.
This is All India Radio giving you the world news. Prime Minister of India on Tuesday spoke with King Charles III of the United Kingdom over the telephone. During the call, a number of subjects of mutual interest were discussed, including climate action, conservation of biodiversity, and innovative solutions for the financing energy transition. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed his appreciation for King Charles III's abiding interest and advocacy on these issues. This was the Indian Prime Minister's first conversation with King Charles III after he assumed the office of the Sovereign of the UK. Mr. Modi conveyed his best wishes to the King for a very successful reign. The Prime Minister apprised him of India's priorities for its G20 presidency, including the propagation of digital public goods. He also explained the relevance of Mission Life, lifestyle for environment, through which India seeks to promote environmentally sustainable lifestyles. The leaders also exchanged views on the Commonwealth of Nations and how to further strengthen its functioning. They also appreciated the role of the Indian community in the UK in acting as a living bridge between both countries and enriching bilateral relations. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called upon the scientific community to work on subjects that meet increasing needs of the country. Speaking at the inaugural session of the 108th Indian Science Congress in the city of Nagpur through video conferencing, he said the scientific community should work on innovation to meet India's energy requirements.
साइंस के प्रयास बड़ी उपलब्धियों में तभी बदल सकते हैं जब वो लैब से निकलकर लैंड तक पहुंचे, जब उसका प्रभाव ग्लोबल से लेकर ग्रासरूट तक हो, जब उसका विस्तार जर्नल से लेकर जमीन तक हो, जब उससे बदलाव रिसर्च से होते हुए रियल लाइफ में दिखने लगे.
Mr. Modi also said the increasing participation of women is a reflection of the progress of society and science. The Indian Prime Minister said data and technology can take India's science to new heights. Our correspondent reports that the theme of this year's Indian Science Congress is Science and Technology for Sustainable Development with Women Empowerment. During the 5-day event, the participants will discuss and deliberate on ways to increase the number of women in higher echelons of teaching, research and industry. A special program to showcase the contribution of women in science and technology will also be held, which will also witness lectures by renowned women scientists. Bangladesh will start receiving electricity from the power plant at Godda in Indian state of Jharkhand from mid-March to meet the needs of the country during the summer months. This was stated by Minister of State for Power Nasrul Hamid on Monday. He made the comment after inspecting the 1600 megawatt under construction power plant. A dedicated power transmission line has already been constructed to supply electricity from India to Bangladesh. The minister said the government is also looking for alternative sources of energy to meet the country's demand for fuel. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has said his government is ready to normalize diplomatic and political connections with the United States. We have a report.
President Maduro said Venezuela is fully ready to take steps towards a process of normalization and regulation of diplomatic, consular and political relations with the U.S. government and with the government that may come. In 2019, Venezuela cut ties with America after the United States started identifying Juan Guaido as the interim president instead of re-elected Nicolas Maduro. In return, Washington targeted Venezuela's oil and financial enterprises and levied damaging prohibitions on Caracas. However, the two countries renewed communion in March last year when President Joe Biden sent a U.S. delegation to Caracas. The objective was to negotiate with the Maduro regime about oil supply problems amid the energy crisis, heightened by cutting ties with Russia, prisoner exchanges, and other topics. Nicolas Maduro's government and the opposition are currently in a power battle. The South American country has been in a downward spiral of growing political discontent for years. While some nations recognize Nicolas Maduro as the legal president, many people have backed Juan Guaido. Anuja Kumar for World News.
Kumar Nadesan, Managing Director of the 92-year-old Veera Kesari, published by Express newspapers, is the only Sri Lankan among 27 others selected globally to receive the coveted Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Award. More from our Colombo correspondent.
The award is given by the President of India to honor exceptional and meritorious contributions in their chosen field, both in India and abroad. Mr. Nadesan serves as the chairman of the Sri Lanka Press Institute and represents the Newspaper Society of the island nation. In addition, he serves as the chairman of the Press Complaints Commission. He is also the president of the Global Organization of People of Indian Origin of Sri Lanka and has been a recipient of the Service Above Self Award from Rotary International for Community Work. The 17th edition of the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas is scheduled to be held from 8th to 10th January 2023 at Indore, Madhya Pradesh. Ahmed Moin Farooqi for All India Radio News, Colombo.
India will take over the leadership of the Asian Pacific Postal Union APPU, having its headquarters in Bangkok silent from this month. The Communications Ministry said the APPU is an intergovernmental organization of 32 member countries of the Asian Pacific region. The goal of APPU is to extend, facilitate and improve postal relations between member countries and to promote cooperation in the field of postal services. Dr. Vinay Prakash Singh, erstwhile member personnel, Postal Services Board, will take over the charge of Secretary General of the Union for a tenure of 4 years. Secretary, Department of Post, Vineet Pandey said this is the first time an Indian is leading an international organization in the postal sector. He said it is a privilege for the department to have its officer lead the activities of the Union, especially beginning from this year of India's G20 presidency. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi complimented the people of Assam for their efforts towards rhino conservation in the state after 0 poaching incidents were reported in the last year. Sharing a tweet by Chief Minister of Assam Himanta Biswa Sarma, the Prime Minister expressed his happiness over proactive efforts taken by the people to protect the rhinos and showing the way. Earlier, Mr. Sarma in his tweet shared his delight that 2022 was really special for the government's rhino conservation efforts. He said not a single rhino was poached last year except 2 in 2021. Mr. Sarma said the giant rhino is now much safer in Assam. He appreciated the Assam Forest Department and Assam Police Force for their sincere efforts to protect the iconic animal. The year 2023 is being celebrated as International Year of Millets IYM globally, under a proposal sponsored by India and endorsed by the United Nations General Assembly. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who led India's efforts in this regard, has a vision to make IYM 2023 a people's movement alongside positioning India as a global hub for millets. India accounts for almost 80% of Asia's and 20% of global millets production. Being grown in more than 130 countries at present, Millets are considered traditional food for more than 500 million people across Asia and Africa. However, their cultivation is declining in many countries, and their potential to address climate change and food security is not being realized in full. Our Beijing correspondent spoke to Professor Diao Qianmin, the leading scientist in millets research at Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences, on significance of IYM 2023 for China and the world in terms of food security.
Actually, for this initiative, I think it's very important because agriculture, we all know maize, know rice, but many people do not know there are many other crops, mostly millets. These crops are also very important. They are representing the developing and developing countries where people are use this kind of crop as their main staple food.
In cricket, India defeated Sri Lanka by 2 runs in the first T20 encounter of 3-match series at Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai on Tuesday. Put into bat, India posted 162 runs with loss of 5 wickets in the stipulated 20 overs. Opener Ishan Kishan made 37 runs of 29 balls, while skipper Hardik Pandya chipped in with 29 runs in 27 deliveries. Deepak Hooda blasted 41 runs of 23 balls, while Aksar Patel smashed 31 in 20 balls. In reply, Sri Lanka were bowled out for 160 runs. Rohit Sharma is unavailable due to an injury. In his place, Hardik Pandya has been named captain for the series. Virat Kohli and KL Rahul have not been selected. And now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Straits Times writes, World Bank seeks more funds to address climate change and other crises. The Global Times writes, China gets off to a good start with New Year tourism rebound, boosts market confidence for 2023 economic recovery. The Guardian writes, extreme right Israeli minister visits Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. The Business Recorder reports 2 British citizens among dead in mid-air helicopter collision near Australian theme park. Wall Street Journal writes, Ukraine has digitized its fighting forces on a shoestring. The Washington Post writes, Europe prepares to take in more Ukrainians with less support in 2023. And CNN writes, Australia's top health advisor urged government against restrictions on travellers from China. Now a quick look at the headlines once again. President of India Draupadi Murmu says, in the atmosphere of discord and wars, global community is looking towards India for a solution. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar criticizes China for not following border agreements with India. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh dedicates to the nation 28 border infrastructure projects worth 724 crore rupees. Russia says more than 60 of its soldiers killed in an Ukrainian strike on Moscow-controlled territory in Donetsk. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks with King Charles III of United Kingdom, discusses India's G20 presidency and climate action. Venezuela ready to normalize ties with US, says President Nicolas Maduro. And in cricket, India beat Sri Lanka by 2 runs in the first T20 match in Mumbai. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from United Kingdom. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.